For the first time in a while, Apple has a sub-$1,000 MacBook. Well, technically. The new and improved MacBook Air starts at $999, a drop from its old $1,099 base price. Apple also doubled the entry-level storage from 128 gigabytes to 256 gigs. Most important of all, though, Apple fixed the keyboard. That's right, no more flat, sticky butterfly keys. What we have here isn't as cushy as the old-school MacBook Air keyboard, but it's just as comfortable and easy to type on, and more stable, too. If everything I've said so far about the keyboard sounds familiar, that's because Apple just a few months ago unveiled a brand new keyboard design with the new 16-inch MacBook Pro. This is the same underlying design, just in a smaller 13-inch machine. Apple says the keyboard was inspired by its existing Magic Keyboard. You know, the standalone one that ships with iMacs. For starters, Apple reverted to a so-called scissor design, which was the standard before Apple took a chance on the butterfly model. This time, though, there's a new rubber dome under the keycaps and a mechanism that locks the top of the stroke to minimize wobble. I repeat, this is the most important upgrade the new Air has to offer, and yes, it is reason enough to plunk down $999 on your next computer. Typing on this was such a pleasure that I was sad when I had to hand over the machine to our video producer Brian to take beauty shots. Hey Brian, sup? During my testing, I also had a work-issued MacBook Pro at my disposal, and I very quickly defaulted to the Air, even though it's less powerful. The Air is just so much more pleasant to type on. With the Pro's butterfly keyboard, I get stuck keys, the letter E multiple times, periods where I don't need them, or sometimes my key presses don't register at all. But with the Air, each keystroke feels firm and springy. I can type quickly, aggressively, knowing the keyboard will always keep up. I rarely make typos, and when I do, it's not the keyboard's fault. It's my own, to be honest. Apple also moved to a so-called inverted T layout for the arrow keys. Now, the left and right arrows are shorter than the up and down arrow stack, making them easier to find by feel if you're, say, editing text or doing work inside a spreadsheet. Otherwise, the design is familiar, an aluminum chassis with a slightly tapered profile available in 3 colors. That would be silver, space gray, and rose gold. There's a Touch ID sensor at the right end of the function row, which was easy to configure and consistent in everyday use. The 13.3-inch display has the same resolution as the last Gen Air, which would be 2560 by 1600, with slim bezels and Apple's True Tone technology, which automatically adjusts the color temperature depending on the ambient light. The Air's had True Tone for a little while now, but just in case you're new to it, once you've done a side-by-side comparison by toggling it on and off in the settings, you probably will not want to go back. Trust me on that. Everything else on the outside is the same too. The same 2.8-pound weight, the same dimensions, the same selection of ports, which is to say just a headphone jack and 2 USB-C Thunderbolt 3 connections. If you want more than that, you'll have to step up to the MacBook Pro, which has 4 of them. Either way, it's best to invest in a dongle or 2 now if you haven't already. I won't linger on sound quality, but suffice to say it is decent for what it is. That said, so many of us own smart speakers these days. Me, I have a Sonos One in both my kitchen and living room. If you have access to an AirPlay-enabled speaker, whether that's a Sonos or Apple's own HomePod, you're still better off streaming through that. That said, in a pinch, the Air's built-in speakers are good enough for casual listening and video calls. If you're like me, you're doing a lot of that these days. Across the line, Apple upgraded the CPUs on offer to Intel's 10th generation Core chips and fresh Intel Iris Plus graphics. The entry-level $999 model rocks a dual-core Core i3 chip and 8 gigs of RAM, but the one I tested had a quad-core Core i5 processor. That model will cost you $1299. Coming from my work computer, which has a quad-core Core i7 chip and 16 gigs of RAM, I didn't really notice a significant drop in performance for most tasks. Things like Slack, Spotify, browsing, email, messages, the Notes app, all of that works smoothly on the Air and really doesn't require the highest end hardware to run well. That said, there were small little annoyances here and there. Like when I tried to rotate photos in Apple's Photos app, there's just a tiny delay, but letdowns like that were the exception, not the rule. If I'm going to be doing a lot of work editing photos and video, I'd probably still go for the Pro. But I make my living as a writer and editor, as you guys know, so the Air would probably be fine the majority of the time. And I'd say that's true of the majority of people, most likely. As for battery life, Apple is still claiming 12 hours of video playback or 11 hours of web browsing. I came pretty close to that. I put together a 13-hour playlist in the Apple TV Plus app just to be safe, but in fact, the machine went dark after 11 hours and 34 minutes. Close enough, I'd say. In daily use, your mileage is definitely going to vary. Apple's official 11-hour stat assumes you're browsing in Safari. I use Chrome out of habit, even though I know it's a battery hog. That said, the drain wasn't so bad, at least not until I started doing calls and Hangouts. At one point, the battery plunged by 13% even during a brief meeting. Once I finished the call, the battery continued to drain at a slower rate. All that said, I'd sooner expect a workday of unplugged use, maybe not the full 11 hours under most circumstances. If you're shopping for a lightweight laptop and don't plan on using heavy-duty apps or doing serious gaming, say, the Air is one of a small group of favorites, including the Dell XPS 13, HP Spectre X360, and Microsoft Surface Laptop 3. The MacBook Air is a solid choice for everyone, but I feel especially certain that for Apple fans who are going to buy a Mac anyway, the Air is now a suitable option for basically most of them, thanks to both the lower price, the increased base storage, and, of course, that vastly improved keyboard. Remember to like and subscribe to Engadget for more tech news and review videos similar to this. Thanks a lot.